The biggest moment of the year, Kimi Antonelli just gave the biggest shock to the F1 world. He proved on Sunday that Formula One is not just about experience, but that if you know the sauce, you can make it happen. Let's break it down. Seems like the time for the young guys, or the new generation, might be coming sooner than we think. Kimi's race win and a big performance by Ollie Bearman, a lot has happened. Let's analyze this race and see who's ahead and why. It's a much clearer picture than Australia. Mercedes are well ahead at this point. This is the pace distribution of all the cars that ran. Mercedes and Ferrari once again are the quickest cars. We can see instead of the 1 to 1.5 tenths which was between them in Australia, here it extended to 5 to 6 tenths of gap. This is due to several factors. China was more of a traditional circuit compared to Australia. China is much more difficult on tyre wear, especially for the front lefts, and have much higher speeds which are pulled due to the massive long straights. This strains the tyres when you have to slam on the brake going into corners, which causes a higher level of graining and erratic levels of grip. Like, it's pretty bad. You can be driving one lap and the next lap the tyres feel completely different, almost as if you're sitting in a different car. Think of it like putting bread in the toaster for a minute longer. What happens? It's a lot more rough and harder to eat. The tyres get heated in the same way. The longer you stress it out, the less effective it is to use. From what's gathered, based on the Mercedes' ability to effectively manage their tyres, much of this is the contributing reason as to why Mercedes are so far ahead. Look at the difference in Antonelli's tyre versus Lewis in the podium celebrations here after the Grand Prix. Antonelli has some wear, but Lewis's car suffered visibly much worse wear. This, along with a quicker car, pace-wise, and Leclerc and Hamilton having their race-long ding-dong with each other, makes sense why the gap is this large. In the sprint race, the gaps were even larger. Mercedes probably had their engine turned up a bit due to the race being shorter, and Leclerc and Hamilton's pace, which was sitting about 8 tenths off Mercedes for that session. What makes this interesting though is Antonelli still managed to have better pace than Russell throughout the race. Antonelli being ahead would have meant that there was more room for him to lower his pace and manage his tyres more. Yet, he still managed to have more pace than George for the entirety of the race. These new regulations seem to fit Antonelli's driving. The lower cornering speeds have given him an opportunity to use his sharp and aggressive throttle application throughout the slow corners. He was consistently picking up the power earlier than Russell. Look at Antonelli, who's represented by the white line here, against Russell, who's the blue line. Antonelli almost stabs the throttle, unlike George, who applies it more gently. In simple terms, he just had bigger balls than George through most of the slow corners. Russell, however, it should be noted that he was quicker in Sector 3 and he only had the one run in Quali 3. So it's not entirely accurate that Kimi would have for sure beaten him in qualifying. Turns out qualifying was pretty important too, since Hamilton and Leclerc came to compete. Russell was the unlucky of the two drivers and ended up caught behind in the dirty air of the Ferrari Civil War. This would have killed George's pace, being stuck in the Ferrari's dirty air. This would have effectively ate up his tyres, whereas Kimi had free track for most of that time, letting his tyres stay cool and most importantly fast. Even battery-wise, Kimi had no competition up front, which would have let him use his battery in an optimized way compared to Russell, who would have been deploying against the Ferraris in an attempt to pass them. It doesn't take anything away from Kimi. He earned what he got at the end of the day. He still had to put in a time worthy of pole. He still had to repass Lewis for the lead and build a gap and maintain his pace. So the victory can't be taken away from Kimi just because George suffered some tough luck. If this data is going to be a theme that runs throughout 2026, we may see a championship fight this year. Looking lower down the field at the midfield, that's pretty much everyone bar Cadillac and Aston Martin. Red Bull is a big eyeball here. They weren't even on top of the midfield. After the sprint, they couldn't turn it around, obviously. It's really a disaster here, and Max is not a happy camper at all. On top of not liking the way these 2026 cars drive, his car is dead slow, and currently is even a bit of a gap behind Alpine and Haas, about 4 tenths shy of Alpine and 3 tenths of Haas. He didn't complete all the laps, therefore wouldn't have had the benefit to go on the lowest fuel loads. Therefore the pace maybe is a bit misleading, but really still the highest he would have been able to get here was P5. So they're still very far off. Hajar, who did finish, ended up 87 seconds off the leader in the end. The Red Bull was nearly lapped, which even just saying sounds insane. Gasly tops the midfield, being around 1.2 seconds slower than Antonelli every single lap on average. But this is a big jump for Alpine, who were 2 seconds off in Australia. So they have made big gains since Australia. Seems like they're understanding their car more, and that pre-season testing pace they showed is starting to become a bit more apparent now. Bearman as well massively outperformed Ocon and had a fantastic race. Really showing his stuff this year, and he's looking very solid. Let's see if he can keep this form up. Currently P5 in the standings, which is a bit nuts. We don't know where the McLarens would have been, but from the sprint race they seem to be in a world of their own. Not quick enough to race the Ferrari or Mercedes, but well ahead of the other midfield runners. McLaren is kind of in a no man's land at the moment. Their car had electrical issues, whatever that means. And McLaren hasn't really been very explicit as to what those issues are. It could be something similar to what Russell faced in his Quali 3 dilemma, but that's speculation, and McLaren won't let it out of the bag as to why they had the double DNS. It could be a power unit problem from the Mercedes powertrains, or it could just be a car issue from the McLaren itself, but it's not really known at this point. Hypothetically, pace-wise, we can assume the McLarens would have sat behind the Ferraris and ahead of Gasly's Alpine on the chart, but that would have only been good enough for a hypothetical P5 and P6. Further down, looking at the back markers, Cadillac and Aston Martin, well, yeah, you can see 3.5 and 4 seconds slower laps. That's atrocious, but now just seems to be the norm for them. They need mega upgrades and even probably need the midfield to basically freeze in pace if they have any hopes of catching up at all. The 10 fastest laps, as you can see, it's very obvious which car was the quickest around here. Kind of playing into the stories of Mercedes' dominance. They're consistently fast, and this is just a display of complete race control. I don't know what to say. This is very much confirmation that Mercedes is pretty far away from everyone, and it will take a massive amount of work for anyone to catch them this year. Ferrari is pretty far back, especially regarding the power unit, and we saw that throughout the whole weekend. Here's a very interesting piece of telemetry I found from lap 24 of the main race. Down the back straight, Russell made up 345 kilometers an hour, whereas you can see Leclerc was only doing 329 and Hamilton 303. Russell's line is flat, so he's using his boost function, and therefore his speed is not dropping at all. But Hamilton's line is dropping. He's past it. The revs are gone, and the car is charging now. It's absolutely massive. It's more than 40 kilometers of difference. At that rate, it's basically a certainty that you will be passed. That's where the Ferraris are missing out. They have no ability to keep up, and their tires is just much more susceptible to tire wear. With those two factors alone, it becomes nearly an impossibility for them to race Mercedes, even if their cornering speeds may be higher. Regardless, at least we got to see a long battle of Hamilton versus Leclerc. That's all the data. Hope you enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe. Comment what you think of the Mercedes, if Kimi deserved it, and if you think Ferrari can close it down soon. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.